Hi there, it's Robert here. I'm an Associate Professor in the Department of Engineering at La Trobe University. Today I'll be talking to you about educational escape rooms for next generation defence training. Why do we need next generation defence training? Well, training as a whole isn't always equally effective. Some training is great, and I'm sure you've remembered training sessions you've been to and you remember things and said, oh, that was great, that was a great trainer and things like that. But on the other hand, you might remember some that were, well, maybe a little less stellar would be a nice way of putting it. And there's lots of different reasons why this might be the case. In terms of effective, what I'm talking about is, did the learners actually learn what they needed to learn? And do they remember it after they walk out of the room? Well, there's lots of reasons why this might not happen, because there's many variables within any training circumstance or any training session. Everything from the trainer, which might be great or maybe not so great. Likewise, the learner, which might be highly motivated or not very motivated. And there might be reasons why they're not very motivated. There might be all sorts of things going on in their lives that the trainer doesn't realize that have distracted them or causing them to think about other things or taking their attention away from what they need to learn. There's also the training material, and not all training material is equally interesting or engaging for all people. And so that's another aspect of the training equation of how much people are taking in. The environment's another factor of some environments are more conducive to learning than others, particularly if there's distractions present or things that are detracting from the learning experience. The communication medium's another one, and there's lots of different ways we can conduct training. And in the dozen or so years that I've been lecturing, I've seen shifts from whiteboards and using overhead transparencies and things through to PowerPoint, through to these educational escape rooms, what we'll be talking about today. There's different ways you can conduct training in each of those as well. From a very passive form of training where people are just taking in knowledge and listening but not actually using it, through to active learning where participants are using knowledge, applying that knowledge and teaching each other that knowledge and being able to reason and apply that to solve particular problems. That active learning also primes them to want to understand and know what the next step is and understand what the solution is. Now, sometimes there's also a differential in the perceived value of the training. Some people say, why do we need to learn this? This isn't very interesting. I'm not very motivated to do it. One of the things that we'll see with these educational escape rooms we'll be talking about today is that they significantly increase learner motivation because people want to actually complete these educational escape rooms. But before we launch right into the educational escape rooms, let's talk about what escape rooms actually are. Now, escape rooms, or recreational or commercial escape rooms, are basically a fun recreational activity. They came out of Japan around 2007, and from there they've spawned off into a worldwide industry of tens of thousands of escape rooms, which are live action role-playing games. Essentially, participants, typically groups of 3 or 4 participants, will be locked in a room with a whole series of puzzles. The room will have a theme around it, and they need to solve those puzzles and unlock locks and work out clues to try and escape. There's normally a time pressure involved, typically 60 minutes, but there's longer escape rooms out there. And a theme around it. Anything from a bank heist to defusing a bomb. There's all sorts of different themes out there. There's detective ones and zombie ones and all sorts. But realistically, what they are is recreational fun activities. They're great for team bonding and problem solving, but they're for fun. Well, I started exploring how we can take those fun elements and those teamwork elements and those communication elements into the classroom. So what I've done is create educational escape rooms for education, being able to use them in the classroom in almost any field to strongly engage the learners and make them want to learn, increasing what we call their intrinsic motivation. Now, we don't have lots of small rooms to lock teams of 3 or 4 students in at a time, so that's not very scalable running it in that form when you've got maybe hundreds of students that you need to teach. So what we do is we use what we call a tabletop escape room. In a tabletop escape room, and you see some examples of these students completing one here, we have learners that are working around a table. We could have 50, 100 students in a classroom doing this all on their separate tables. And all the puzzles are in sealed envelopes. So when they want to open the next puzzle, when they've finished the puzzle, they can open the next puzzle unwrap that puzzle and actually start solving that puzzle. But what we need is some way to tell them whether they've got the puzzle, the answers to that puzzle right or not, and they can go on to the next part. And that's where we use these electronic decoder box. This was something that I actually invented, and basically it has 4 main roles. The firstly is that validation one. It tells the learners, have they got it right or have they got it wrong? The next one is it provides them with clues, so they don't get stuck indefinitely when they don't know how to solve a particular problem. It'll give them some clues along the way. You can turn that on or off. The third one it does is timekeeping. And the timekeeping allows them to keep track of how much time they've got remaining. Now, if you're tying that in with a narrative, it might be how long till the zombies break through, or how much oxygen's left in the submarine that you're trapped in, or whatever it might be. The final thing it does is a whole lot of back-end data analytics that records how long they took for each of the puzzles and how many wrong guesses they made for each of the puzzles. We also implemented something there that each wrong guess could be penalised with a penalty. And typically in the classroom I choose a 1-minute penalty so that they know that they can't just take wild guesses. They need to actually solve those puzzles and try and find the right solution to them. Now, we've used this across many different fields, and educational escape rooms have been widely used in literature as well. I've used them across everything from engineering and mathematics through to biochemistry. We've used them in physics. We've used them even in theology, in geography, all sorts of different areas, because they're widely applicable, where you just pick puzzles that suit the sort of things that we're training in. I've used this for learners as young as 5 years old, up to learners as old as 85 years old. So we've got a wide breadth of where we can apply this to and who we can use it with. The final thing is the narrative, because we want a narrative there, otherwise the learners are just solving a series of puzzles. And the narrative turns it into a game and turns it into something fun that will increase the intrinsic motivation and make the learners want to learn. Because if a learner wants to learn, it's a whole lot easier for them to learn than if they're just there because they need to be. So that narrative could be anything from, I've done some that are people trapped in a Cold War bunker where the oxygen's starting to run out, through to an old Aztec mine, through to some robots trying to escape from a transport ship before they're delivered to the scrapyard. All sorts of different narratives, and the puzzles tie into each of those different narratives and engage the learners in wanting to learn that. Well, let's then talk about the puzzles. And here's a bunch of different puzzles I've used at the university level within engineering and associated areas to give a bit of a breadth of understanding about where these can go. On the far left, we've got some examples of how we use free space path loss. Radio antennas, as information is transmitted, the signal strength will be attenuated over time, and we can mathematically model that. And here, the participants in the escape room needed to actually work out what sort of signal strength they had at each of those antennas based on free space path loss equations. In the middle, just to show that these aren't all paper-based, we've got some little circuit boards here, and they need to use a multimeter. This is kind of at high school level to actually work out what pins are connected to what pins and what pins are at different voltages and things like that. Down the bottom, we've got examples of using gears and gear trains and working out the direction of each of those gears are going to be turning. Just above that, we've got examples of using serial communications and decoding serial communications. But that could be any type of communications on any sort of a bus that people would need to decode. And finally, the one at the top, because we have a lot of international students, gives students a chance to actually understand a bit about Australia. How big it is, where the different towns and cities are in Australia, and how far they are apart. But as I said, we've used this across many different areas, from biochemistry through to physics, through the mathematics. Lots of different areas are applicable. And that gets me thinking about where these can be used with defence applications as well. And pretty well any training module that you could conceive of a form of that could be escapified. What do I mean by escapified? We'll put in this developing puzzles that can be in this escape room format to be highly engaging and have people working together to collaboratively solve them. Anything from understanding various things about weapon systems through to cybersecurity. I know that one because I'm developing a series of cybersecurity puzzles at the moment, particularly targeted at high school students. They could be things around engineering or technical skills, like some of the puzzles that I've just been showing. or maybe ones around survival, bushcraft, RATEL, radio communications, doing map reading and understanding and triangulating things on a map. One nice side effect around these, besides the actual content and the things the participants are learning, is the development of collaborative problem solving and communication skills that are happening within each of those teams. Because often it's not just one person solving it, but they're relying on each other. And once they've worked out and unlocked the solution to a particular puzzle, they're all working and replicating that solution in their own part of that puzzle to bring that together to solve, to get the digits they need to unlock the code there. The other key area I see this having defence applicability is in recruiting. And I say that because we use it widely within STEM and within engineering to recruit people to study engineering and to recruit people to interest them in STEM concepts. And we've developed a few engineering ones, some mathematics ones. And the idea behind it is high school students, typically year 7 to 10, we engage them in these small group activities where we give them these envelopes, they start solving these very basic engineering problems, but applying themselves in this collaborative environment that they really enjoy. And it really opens up their mind to see where the sort of concepts of trigonometry and the concepts they're learning in the classroom in physics or chemistry or maths or whatever it may be are actually used in real life and applied to bridges and the water supply and ciphers and codes and all sorts of things like that. Within defence, we could create some escape rooms that will equip people to understand the basics of what the Defence Force actually does, or what's the role of the Army, or where are they deployed and how are they used, or some equipment that they're using to really open their eyes and understanding of what the breadth is and the scope is and all the different areas that they might be interested in applying for. In terms of learner feedback, we've had phenomenal feedback from hundreds and hundreds of learners across many different disciplines. You can see here in this graph, people want to complete these escape rooms. The vast majority either agree or strongly agree that they wanted to complete, they wanted to actually finish. And that's because their intrinsic motivation is a whole lot higher. If you compare this to a bunch of people that you say, here's some problems, just solve these, you're getting much higher results out of this than that. We've created follow-up surveys with them, and a lot of them have said they lost track of time or lost track of their surroundings. And what this is indicative of something called flow, where they're engaged in an activity and their mind's so focused on the activity, they're blocking out things around them because that activity is what has captivated them and held their focus. They've also really enjoyed the activity, and you can see some learner feedback here saying it's really fun, but also they're getting this important confirmation of knowledge, or it's uncovering areas that they didn't understand but maybe thought they understood. Students are also keen to have this as an assessed activity, and so we run assessed escape rooms within our engineering classrooms as well. Now here's a brief checklist that I've compiled of things that I've learnt along the way. Now sometimes these escape rooms are just too cryptic, or the puzzles are too cryptic and learners can't get them. And so we need to actually check whether they're too cryptic or you're making huge logical leaps in your mind that the learners won't necessarily make, or they just won't know. Also, is it fun, or is it starting to get annoying? Because if you do the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, at some point it will start not being so fun anymore and start being a bit irritating, really. We know that from our own lives. The puzzles also should blend with a theme in some way, and there's lots of different ways that we can make puzzles kind of fit towards a theme rather than just sticking out and being a bit obscure. Now, not all the puzzles are paper-based. We do a lot of puzzles that have things in them like those circuit boards or encoder wheels or multimeters or oscilloscopes and things. And so we need to make sure that they're not going to break the first time students use them. And the final tip is to do plenty of play testing. So test it first, we test it with alpha testers, other trainers and people that have expertise in a particular area to make sure the puzzles are actually solvable and logical. But then we test it with beta testers to make sure that the sort of participants that we're expecting to do it are able to complete it eventually, and they learn something as a result of it. So, if you're interested in taking training to the next level, to unlocking learning within students, or within maybe unlocking potential future recruits through recruiting-based ways of using educational escape rooms, please get in contact. My email is there, and here's a bunch of academic papers that I've recently written showing the benefit and the role of engaging learners with these educational escape rooms in the classroom. Thanks so much for listening.